guys, and welcome back to Slice and Mike. Today we're talking about Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, which is one of the most hyped books of 2015, and I have lots to say about it. Fair warning, this will be a pretty rambly video. Before I get into my thoughts though, let's start with a brief plot synopsis. Red Queen tells a story of Mare, who is a red peasant, and in this world there are the Reds and there are the Silvers. The Silvers have superhuman abilities and they're the nobility, and the Reds are kind of the peasant underclass thing. The main conflict in this book is between the Reds and the Silvers. The Silvers obviously want to stay in power, and the Reds are starting to get sick of the way they're treated, so there's an uprising kind of brewing on the horizon. Mare is at the age where she's going to be conscripted into joining the army if she doesn't find a job soon. Unbeknownst to her, she meets the crown prince of her country, in a bar of all places, and he gives her a job in his palace. So she comes to the palace and starts to work for the king and queen. Events lead to events, and it's discovered that she has abilities of her own. That causes everybody to go insane because they've never known a Red to have silver abilities, and Mare is drafted into the court, and she's basically made captive of the king and queen. They want to keep an eye on her and possibly use her to quell the Red uprising. Now for my thoughts, and let's start with a positive first. I liked, or I could at least appreciate, the world building. I thought it was creative how different families of Silvers have different abilities. So Mare has this electric power, and the king and queen pretend that she's part of a long-lost family of storm casters or something like that. And I also liked the country where Mare lives, called Norda, which is bordered by other nations, and they're all at war with each other, and they all have Silvers, so it's a very superpowery X-Men type war. Although, to be fair, you don't really get much info on the war or what's going on there, so that sucked. But there are some really great fight scenes, kind of gladiator type fights between different Silvers with different abilities, and they match up in different patterns. And once Mare becomes a part of that society, she takes part in these battles, which is kind of training to them, and that was really fun to read. And also, going along with the world building aspects, there were some really great details thrown in, like the fact that when Silvers blush, their cheeks go white because they have silver blood, so obviously they're not going to turn red. I thought that was a really cool detail, and I thought that it added some depth to the world that Victoria Aveyard created here. But we also have to talk about the bad. So I didn't like the magic system, if you can even call it that. They don't call it magic, they call them abilities, I think. And there's no reason given for how this started, why the Silvers have powers and the Reds don't. It might be explained in the next book, and there was no reason given as to why the different houses have different types of abilities. I thought that there should have at least been some sort of explanation. Not to mention the fact that Mare, 2 days ago, didn't know she had abilities, and then now she knows perfectly how to use them and can basically defeat anyone in the gladiator ring. So let's compare that to, say, Harry Potter. At the end of book 1, he still has no clue what he's doing, and he's a terrible wizard. If he knew what he was doing, he could have defeated Voldemort at the end of book 1 and just ended the series 6 books early. And the more I think about the magic or the abilities in this book, the more it just feels like Pokemon to me. People have abilities over fire and water and grass, and they match up in pretty predictable ways. So it just kind of turned into Mare being a really whiny Pikachu, in my opinion. I also have to talk about the flipping love triangle because I hate love triangles so much. So Mare, the main character, has 2 boys who she thinks are pretty keen. There's Cal, who's the crown prince of her kingdom, and there's another guy named Killorn who's just this really cool dude from her hometown. I understand why love triangles are a thing, or at least I can sort of defend them. It's supposed to show how the protagonist is thrown into this new world and she's struggling to find out who she is, and there's this wonderful new guy who understands exactly what she's going through and can relate to her that way. And then back home there's this other guy, usually, like in the Hunger Games, who knows where she comes from, what kind of twists of fate led to her becoming the woman she is today. But in this book there is just no emotional payoff. She doesn't choose either of the guys, and the romance just felt obligatory. It was lackluster, I think. Why you gotta be so indecisive? Just pick a guy and go with it. One more slightly negative thing to say about the world building is I felt like there was a lot of potential here to create this sort of unique culture in terms of Reds versus Silvers, but there just wasn't anything to distinguish this country from, say, the country where I live today. The author doesn't talk about what kind of food they eat, she doesn't talk about what language they speak or what idioms they use in everyday speech. There's a few references to the clothes they wear and the architecture, but it didn't really feel that unique to this country. And I also thought there should have been a greater difference between the Reds' culture and the Silvers' culture, because they've been separated for centuries and the Silvers rule them. Granted, there were a few differences between them, but it kind of seemed like it was just because the Silvers had power and money and not because they were used to doing things in a different way, if you know what I mean. To sum things up for you here, I thought there was pretty good potential for the book and I was super excited to read it, but I felt like the plot was pretty standard and the characters and the locale weren't all that interesting. I gave the book 3 stars on Goodreads, and if I do read the sequel, I'll probably just be reading it for plot, and I don't really care about the world or the characters themselves. But who knows, I might be surprised. This is only the author's first book, and I know books usually get better as the author writes more, so it could be a really good sequel. I don't know. But even though I didn't like it, I think the potential is there for other people to like it, so all I will say is read at your own risk. So now I'm really bummed out because this book was on my most anticipated books of 2015 list, and it just fell really short of those expectations. If you guys are planning on reading Red Queen, or if you've already finished it, let me know what your thoughts are, and maybe we can try to come to terms with what this book is and isn't. That's all for now. I'll talk to you later in the week, and I'll see you back here on Friday. Bye!